What's up, Nerf Nation? This is a mod guide of the Nerf Rival Khaos. Here we go. Alright, for this build you're going to need a soldering iron, some solder. Recommended is some rosin flux and something to clean your iron with. A lighter also comes in handy. 2 micro switches. These are what I used. They're 16 amp micro switches. They also make a smaller one than this. That also could work. A battery tester of some sort, and it helps to have some alligator clips. I used a 9-volt. You could also use a AA pack. Some handy hands. I use an XT60 connector to connect to my lipos. You're going to need that or whatever connector you need to connect your lipo to. I have actually 2 different types of wire strippers. I like these better for wire stripping, and this I use basically just to cut my wire, but you're going to need something to strip and cut your wire. Speaking of wire, you need enough wire. This is not enough, but you need wire to rewire your blaster. This is 16 AWG silicon wire. I recommend at least 18 AWG silicon wire. Some shrink wrap. I actually have a thing here that has all different sizes. It's going to be helpful to have multiple size shrink wraps. So shrink wrap, a plastic epoxy. This is Loctite 20-minute set time. So you're going to need a plastic epoxy, super glue, probably need a razor blade or X-Acto blade. You're definitely going to need a number 0 screwdriver. I recommend a number 0. You might be able to get away with a number 1, but number 0 screwdriver. Some sort of snips. These are really nice because it allows you to get super close. I like this style. You'll be using this to cut plastic out the inside of your blaster to make space for the micro switches. Electrical tape, not necessary but useful to have. You're going to need a Dremel of some sort. This is actually my battery powered one. If you're going to get a Dremel, I recommend a different one, which I'll link in the description. But I like this one because it doesn't need a cord, and it's worked okay for this build. But it's not very powerful, and the battery dies really fast. So recommend the corded version of the Dremel. But you're going to need a sanding bit. I actually used 2 different sizes, one small, one big, and then possibly even a cutting wheel. So those are all things you use most of the time when you mod. So if you don't have those, I highly recommend getting a set. Things I also used in this build but not necessary is a magnet. And this helps when you drop a screw or something, or getting a screw out of a screw port. It's just a magnet, so that's not necessary but helpful. And then these are like tweezers that help hold things, and this is useful to have too but not necessary. You're probably going to need a pair of scissors to cut your shrink wrap, possibly needle nose pliers, and you're going to need something to cut metal because you're probably going to have to snip off part of your micro switch. So this is a 10 snips, but something to cut this metal with. You could also probably do it with your Dremel. I love this blaster. I mean, it's become a lot of fun playing with it, but it is just way too dang heavy with these D batteries. It's pretty powerful with stock batteries and performance, but not quite up to my standards, so we're going to rewire it, give it a little more juice, and yeah, let's just get started. So I've already unscrewed that, so we just got to pop that off and get these batteries out. I think the batteries weigh more than the blaster. Anyways, we won't need that anymore. Go ahead and stick that in there. That one's shorter. This one's a little shorter. It's kind of an in-between size. guys, so we got some beefy motors as expected in this blaster. I'm not sure if, I think this one's a little smaller than the two that are in the flywheels, and I'm gonna run this thing off of this big old 3S 60C LiPo. That's plenty. This is really overkill in terms of size, but a 3S should be a good capacity to run these, and I just have this battery, so it's big enough to fit in this cage, I do believe, so I'm going to use that one, I think. So we're going to have to desolder a ton of stuff. All this stuff around here is going to have to be desoldered. We're going to snip all this stuff, but you really want to make sure you desolder these points here to remove all this. Don't pull off anything, don't yank apart anything. You have to desolder it, because if you don't, you're going to screw up your motors, and then your blaster is going to be kaput, because it's very difficult to find replacement motors for these. I don't know of any offhand. I'm sure there are some out there if you search around, and yeah, so hopefully we can retain these motors. So to do that, you have to desolder and remove things properly. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so we got all that removed. We can go ahead and take this out. This is another lock. This is a magazine lock, so we don't need this. I think, let me see if I can get this out without taking that out. Yep, that just comes right out. You pull all this right out. So far, there we go. Won't need that. That part's trash. We pull these terminals out, and that's not needed there. And then the last, there's this switch we're going to replace, and this switch we're going to replace. So go ahead and pull those out. So keep that screw, keep that. We're probably going to reuse that. We'll see. We'll just go ahead and pull that out. There you go. All that wiring we don't need anymore. So this is their trigger lock. If you like your trigger lock, keep it in. If you don't, you can take it out. I'm going to take it out. It's probably going to be hard to keep this in anyways when you put your micro switch in, and I don't like trigger locks. And actually, the way I plan on wiring this thing, you won't need this lock anyways. It'll be electronic. You won't be, if you pull the trigger, it won't fire. Okay, so I've got everything back in place. Check the polarity of the motors. The negative terminal is going to be on the front. Your positive is going to be the back. The top of the pusher is the negative. The bottom of the pusher is the positive. So our first connection we're going to make is the negative here. And it's going to go from the front of the flywheels to the top of the pusher. So we want to have a length of wire that's at least that long. Shouldn't be too long. And I'm actually not going to even cut this piece until I have this connected. So I'm going to go ahead and strip and tin this wire and make this connection. Alright, so made this connection here, put shrink wrap around it, and now we're going to do the positive side. So we're going to do this one, so the exact same thing to the other side. And I'm using blue wire because this will be a lead from a switch. So, okay guys, so I've made this connection, and this wire I kind of hooked in here because they have like a little hook here, and then run it underneath my pusher mech, and then around here, and this is going to go all the way down, and it's going to connect to the new micro switch here, which I have a whole bag of them, but one of these guys, and it's going to connect right in here. So it's going to connect down here, so you just want to make sure you have enough wire when you make that connection to go all the way down to basically the bottom of your grip there. So we're going to have to do some drilling to make this fit in here and get this all set before we can make any more connections. Alright, I'm going to use plastic weld, JB Weld plastic weld for epoxy putty. I mean, pretty much any epoxy putty will work, and I'm going to actually use epoxy putty this time around to secure these in place, just to give it a nice flat surface to sit on, and then it should have enough hold power to hold those micro switches in. So. Alright, so I got that in there, so it's nice and secure, and I've made sure this lever has this pushed as far forward as it can go, so it doesn't have a loose feel to it, because there's no spring there. It doesn't have anything to keep it pushed forward, if that makes sense. So I want to make sure that lever has that pushed all the way forward, but does not engage, obviously, the button there. So you want it push forward but not engaging the button, so when you push back then it engages the button, and that's like perfect placement right there. So I've already made I made this connection, and I made another connection that's on the same terminal, so there's two connections on this common, and this one is going to come back up and go to your trigger control switch. So just make sure you have, it isn't a very long connection, this is way more than enough, but I just haven't cut that quite yet because it's going to be a little bit tight in here with this battery tray, but this is going to come up here, and I think it goes to your normally open, so it's going to have to connect in something like that. I have severely modified this switch. I cut off these so they will fit under here hopefully, and then you're going to have very little space to attach to, so it's going to be a little tricky. I'm hoping it works. If it doesn't work, we'll figure something else out and I'll let you know. Okay, so I shrink wrapped this double connection here, and I've made the connection here. This is going to go to your battery tray and to your power supply, and it's connected to the normally open tab here, and we'll run this back up and through, and then wherever we decide to, however we decide to go through the battery door or tray here, or whatever compartment, I think I'm going to run it up through here, back up this way, and come through the battery tray on this side. So that's nicely, just a 1/4 inch drill bit is what I use. That should have enough room for both the positive and negative to go through there to your battery tray. I've wired up 2 wires here. I connected my blue wire to the normally closed tab here. It is the one that comes off of this right here, and it's running underneath and coming up from underneath to here, so it's hard to see there. And then I went ahead and connected a blue wire from my common, and I've run it, it's tucked in underneath there, and it's going to run all the way back, and this is going to connect into your pusher mechanism. Then you also want to connect, we're going to have to connect a black wire, the negative, which is, this will be the first negative. Oh, light just went out, sorry about that. Hopefully you guys can still see okay. Negative will also come off of here, and it will go to the pusher as well. And then there'll be a splice in the middle of that that goes to our battery tray. Okay, so I have all my wires soldered on there previous to me attaching this in place, just so I make sure it's right where I need it, and it's going to be a lot easier to solder these when this is not in place because of how little room you have there. So I highly recommend you make all your connections before you put this down. Alright guys, I just made this connection, which is your positive lead to your pusher, which is the blue wire we've run up through here. And now we need to do the same thing with the negative, which is actually a double connection. So we're going to connect both of these 2 wires. One's coming from your trigger control switch, and that is the normally closed tab, and it's going to come up here. And then the other one is from your flywheels, and they're both going to connect to this terminal in the pusher. And then we'll shrink wrap both of these off. I have some shrink wrap down there I need to pull up to cover this. And then make sure when you do a double connection you have shrink wrap over both wires if you're going to do it that way. And then you can slide it down and cover the other terminal. Alright, one more thing before you do that. Make sure you give yourself a little splice here in this negative, because that's where our power is going to run off and back into your tray. You could also run it from the normally closed here back through here, but there's just so many wires through here now, and I just figured I'd just come directly from here just to make that a little simpler, and we just don't need quite as long a wire. Also, I've run all my wires from this portion that's running through here underneath the pusher mechanism here. So you probably will have to undo the 3 screws that hold this into the shell. There's one down here, up here, and over here, and that'll just pop out, and then you can just lay everything underneath. There's a lot of room underneath there, and then you put that back down. So yep, there we go. This will sit in here like this. I have plenty of wire to maneuver around here, and hopefully it stays pretty still. We might have to add some foam or something so this doesn't jiggle around. You don't really want your LiPo jiggling around in there. But let's go ahead and see. I've tested this first with a 9 volt, which is not nearly enough juice to get through this system. But and then I put this in, and then we'll see how it does. Those flywheels are a-moving. So the way this is wired, guys, you do have to, it's automatic. Like, you cannot, this will not work unless this is pulled. So that's the nice thing about this wiring system. And so we'll have to looks like we're set. We got the pusher moving and the flywheels are going, so should be good to go. Alright guys, so I had to grind out all this. I did lose this trigger lock, but the actual thing is still there, so it's gonna be there, but so it still looks okay, but it isn't gonna do anything. You just took out this L here, and then I just ground all this down. Obviously it's gonna depend on where you mount your switch. If you're able to mount your switch, your trigger switch here, if you're able to mount this lower, which is going to be very difficult because of all the wiring and whatnot, you might be able to still keep this lock, but the way I did it, we lose that. Not that big a deal, so just know that you might lose that lock if you do this modification. Alright, so a few last things before we close this shell up. I went ahead and added this this little plate here back on just because it fits and it just makes it a little cleaner. Make sure you get your parts back in, and then I make sure you have all your screws locking down your flywheel cage and your pusher mechanism. Make sure everything's in place before you close up the shell, because I've done it many a times. You close up the shell and you realize you forgot something. So, okay guys, everything's put back together now, and let's see how this thing goes. Pretty awesome. As you can see, 2 round bursts are pretty easy. The single burst is a little bit more difficult, but I think it's doable with some practice, and obviously full auto is just awesome now. It's not going to hurt your range with that 3S LiPo. So hope you enjoyed the mod guide. See you in the next video.